This is Born or Made Podcast with your host, Larry Dix.
All right, Mark. Well, it's good to see you here on the Born or Made Podcast today. Welcome, and welcome back to your great state of Florida.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So the first thing I always like to ask is, where were you born?
Born in Christchurch, New Zealand. Long way away.
Long way. So how long did you stay in New Zealand?
I officially left New Zealand in 1996.
Okay, so you're an adult.
Yep.
Well into your adult. And then what brought you to the United States?
Well, I did do a little bit of overseas experience, OE, in the early 80s, travelled through Australia, Africa, the UK, and I ended up for a bit over a year in the US. Always loved it. So it was always my goal to come back to the States and live here. So
okay, so we'll go back a little bit. So you're born in New Zealand, and your family, do you live on a farm, or were you just?
Yeah, I brought up on a farm in North Canterbury, and so I was living on a farm until I was about 5 years of age. My father had aspirations of being an attorney, so he got his law degree, leaving my mother with 3 infant children to run the farm. And then we moved to the city of Christchurch. And but I had and actually still have very close ties to the area that I was originally raised in, because after schooling I went back to that area and farmed in that area.
So you actually were farming back then? You went back and actually. So what kind of animals were you raising? Or were you raising vegetables?
Sheep and crop.
Okay.
Sheep and crop. With New Zealand, where there's more sheep than humans, so we're men are men and sheep are nervous.
Yeah. And what are crops? What do you grow there? Like
wheat, barley.
Okay.
Those type of.
And do you feed those to the sheep as well? I know there's obviously
no. It's more cereals, so it would be
right.
sent for bread and the like.
So what is the most common sheep there?
Oh, nowadays I couldn't actually tell you. We raised Corridales, and there's a lot of different crossbreds.
So I raised sheep in 4-H. You heard of that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I did that as a kid. I raised 4 years, and I remember we had New Hampshires. That was my most popular one. I think I had 3 of those. Anyway, great animal. Amazing that they can actually become like dogs.
Right.
I mean, I don't think people realize, because they're so unusual in America, right? I mean, we don't grow a lot of sheep here, raise a lot of sheep. A farmer down the road from us, he raised, I think, about 50 or 60 a year, sells every one of them. But yeah, I would raise these things, and they were literally like dogs. You just rattle feed, and they'd come to you. I remember I'd walk around on leashes out in the pasture. We had all 2.5 acres or whatever.
Right.
But,
yeah, well, we had a few more than that. I mean, like 3,000 or so.
3,000?
Yeah, it was. Well, we actually had two farms that we joined together. One on my father's side of the family and one on the mother's side of the family. So there was 1,100 acres that we farmed.
Wow, that's almost 2 square miles. That's a lot of land.
Yeah,
the topography is very rolling.
Yes, it was. We were right at the end of the Canterbury Plains, where it started becoming very hilly and that's a good way of describing it, rolling country.
Do you feel like growing up in that type of environment and then going back, did that really kind of forge your love for nature, you think? Is it evolved later in life, or do you think those two connected in any way? Or
yeah, I think that being raised in the country has given me a great affinity to nature and wildlife and the environments that they grow up in. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I grew up in the country, and we're not going to talk about me, but anyway, now I live on a farm. Unfortunately, very late in life, because I couldn't afford the land. It's very expensive here.
Right.
And my whole childhood now has come back. And now I see this huge connection with nature and just how complex it is, how fragile it is, right? And just what little things we do can disrupt those things. Yeah, and definitely. I can imagine you seeing that growing up. And then, so is your area developed yet where you grew up as a farming, or is it still fairly
No, well, it's developed from straight out agricultural to agriculture and viticulture. So there was our family and three others sort of formed the first vineyards in that area.
Oh, really?
And now it's quite a destination for boutique wineries and the like. So we did have a small vineyard, and but now it is a real destination for some of the real good, especially the cold climate reds like Pinot Noir and that sort of stuff.
No kidding. Wow, that's amazing. So I would have never thought New Zealand is wine.
Right, more boutique and those types of things. Not like some of those robust reds that you get out of Australia. It's more of a subtle flavour and subtle wines. But they have some very good whites as well.
So you go back. Now you're an adult at this point, and so how old are you right now when you go back to the farm?
So that would have been, I suppose, in my mid to late 20s.
Okay.
So,
all right. So you go into the big city.
Yeah.
Your father becomes a lawyer.
Oh, sorry, that was at a very early age.
Okay, but you were like 5, right? You said you go into there. So you live in this city.
Uh-huh.
So you go through high school. I guess that's what we call it here. And then you get done with high school, and then where are you going from here?
Then I went back into the country. So my first job was working for my brother-in-law, who was a farmer, a very progressive farmer within the North Canterbury region. And then I eventually went back to the family farm. And then after that, I travelled overseas for several years.
Okay. So I did some, you were on one of your bios, it talks about you did rugby.
Right.
And you mentioned that you came to D.C., close to my hometown.
Yeah.
So tell me about rugby. You know, Americans, we don't know anything about it. I've seen it. They all look like big guys running around throwing this weird shaped ball, you know, similar at least to our football, right? Closer anyway. Soccer I don't get. But.
Yeah. Well, actually, rugby was very instrumental in my upbringing and the values that I developed. And so when I started travelling, I travelled playing rugby and travelled through Australia and then to Africa and then the UK. And then I ended up playing in Southern California with the captain of the US team. And so... But it's a universal language. So you could turn up at a rugby club and you'd be welcome with open arms. And so that's what I did when I first travelled in my early 20s around the world. Just an incredible experience.
Really? So you went all over the world just playing rugby?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And so explain to us guys over here a little bit about rugby. So you've got quarters, innings, what is this?
Okay, it's 2 halves.
So you got 2 halves.
2 40-minute halves and 15 aside. So you're split up into forwards and backs, eight forwards, seven backs. And, of course, no pads, no helmets, just mouth guards. And it's you cannot pass the ball forward. You can kick the ball forward, but that is the whole premise of the game. So you have various techniques to start a game if the ball goes out of bounds or it's there is an infringement like the scrum or a line out, and it is the idea is to touch the ball down over the try line, which is the scoring line, which is called a try. So
is that like our end zone?
Correct.
Okay.
So, and then you can have a designated kicker for penalties and for conversions, just similar to American football. So, but the main thing is you can't pass the ball forward.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be watching rugby tonight on YouTube, trying to figure that out. Yeah, I've always seen it. It's they actually have a small rugby team, a group of guys in our market, even in Fredericksburg.
Right.
A bunch of college kids, and I think some older people that do it. But do older people play that game still later in life, or does it get to the point?
Yeah, you get through to like to your 40s.
Okay.
You would be, you would be looking at retiring and going into coaching or whatever. How good you were.
But it's an actual professional sport.
Yeah, it's the Rugby World Cup is the third largest sporting event in the world, which they had in France the end of last year.
And have you gone to that?
No. They have it every 4 years, like the FIFA World Cup, the soccer World Cup. And so they will have it, I think it's in 2031 here in the US, which is going to be a great spectacle.
Really? Where's it going to be, do you know?
As I understand it, they're going to break it up into zones. So there'll be like Chicago, probably Texas, California, maybe Florida, those sort of things. So
high density.
Yeah, they'll break it up into zones, and they'll break those up into teams in that particular zones, and then it'll consolidate for the quarterfinals, semifinals, and the finals.
Do you think the finals will be up in the Northeast somewhere?
Probably, because that's where they seem to.
Yeah, it came through.
A lot of rugby's been going on in Chicago and that sort of place.
Okay, so you're New Zealand. You've traveled the world at this point doing rugby. You're 25, you're kind of back at the farm, okay? So tell me about once you get to 25, 30, where are you at that point, and where's this trajectory starting to take you?
Okay, so I've got severe dyslexia.
Okay.
And so I had struggled with it all through my schooling years. And so I didn't read my first book until I was 23 years of age, never passed an English test. And
23?
Yeah, and so I shied away from anything academic, and I just focused on wanting to be a farmer, wanting to work on the land, because I didn't have to do anything with the written word, because I developed a severe aversion to the written word. And so the way that it affects me is there are two parts of the left hemisphere of the brain that basically affects me. One is the visual aspect, the occipital temporal area, which is for visualizing words or understanding what words look like, and then the other aspect of it is the area that that you break words up into syllables and understand the sounds. And so I had difficulty with those two areas of the brain, and so I shied away from as I said, anything academic. But while I was overseas, I was in Paddington Station in London, and I was about to embark on a train journey for 2.5 hours up into Leamington Spa, and I spied a book. Back then, there was no cell phones, there was no internet, there was nothing to while away traveling time other than reading. And so I decided to buy a book. It was called When the Lion Feeds by Wilbur Smith, who is a South African author. And I just returned back from a prolonged period in Africa, so I bought it. And that was actually the very first book that I'd read, and it opened up a whole new world to me. It was a very laborious and long process to read it, but it introduced me to something that I didn't know existed. Fast forward, I came back to New Zealand because of a number of reasons. I ended up selling the farm and the vineyard, and I realized that I needed to make a change if I wanted to get on in my life. I needed to be able to confront my issues with dyslexia. And so I actually studied for and received the diploma in clinical hypnotherapy and from the New Zealand School of Hypnotic Science. And I ended up starting a peak performance consultancy, which was based on regression. I would regress these peak performers to find out what issues in their past had actually held them back. And along the way, I was able to assist myself and overcome those constraints of dyslexia. And so I ended up, while I learnt about the power of the subconscious mind, I also found that I was able to to assist myself by embarking on writing my first book, Scars of the Leopard, which basically followed my travels around the world a few years prior.
So I don't know anything about dyslexia other than what little I've read. So you pick up a book. I want to go back to that. You pick up a book that technically you probably can't read.
Right.
Right.
Great
So
difficulty.
how do you get through that? I mean, and I'm just asking because this has always intrigued me. So you're looking at a series of letters and they are this way. They could be sideways. I don't know. So how did you know that this was an E, even though it was shaped like this, or an S? I mean, how did your mind do that? I mean, that is just mind. That is.
Well, for me, it seems to only be numbers that get reversed for me. The letters themselves don't really get reversed. I just can't break words up into syllables, and I still can't to this day. And so the way that it works is it's from a phonological point of view. And so those little syllables are the phonemes are, and how those syllables are pronounced, and I can't do it. And so the way that I overcame it was through rote learning and repetition, by literally looking up words, looking up their antonyms, looking up their synonyms, to embed through the rote learning the use of my hippocampus region to memorize words and to understand their meaning. And so it was that first book, it was a very slow process. And so but eventually, through deciding to start, that I started making gains and getting over my dyslexia.
Do you think that your determination through not only farming and stuff like that, but rugby gave you that discipline? Do you think at some point to be able to, with athleticism, to be able to do that? I mean,
yeah. So, well, one of the things with people who have dyslexia, there is a very high proportion of entrepreneurs that are dyslexic.
So I knew that. I've heard that before. I don't know the percentage.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons is the spatial recognition, spatial contexts. So they're very good at understanding the space between things, whether it's in engineering or whether it's for architecture, those sort of things. And for me, I eventually learned the spatial context of words and sentences. And so while I still couldn't break up the words themselves, through rote learning, I was able to recognize the context of sentences. Like, I developed mental maps of how a sentence fitted together and what that sentence was trying to say. And so that's how, and dyslexia, while it's looked at as a disadvantage, for me is probably the biggest gift that I've ever been given.
Well, I think that's a big deal for people to hear. I mean, because when you were saying all that, I was like, wow, what a gift. Like, you have the ability, you have a skill that I could never get. I don't have the ability to do that. And yet you are able to, through dyslexia, I mean, give you some depths that are.
Well, one of the things, Larry, is that dyslexia is left side. It comes from impairment on the left side. So you compensate by using the right side of your brain. And so there's a lot of right hemisphere compensation. So when people would come and sit down on my consultancy, within a couple of seconds, I already knew what their issue was. So it was so I developed my intuition to a very high degree. Now, sometimes would take months for that person to understand it themselves. But so people with dyslexia are normally very right-brained. They're very intuitive. They use those spatial contexts to allow them to excel. And so if you can start overcoming your dyslexia, and if you use the likes of neuroplasticity, you will start repairing those areas that are impaired, but you do not diminish what you've highly developed on the right side. So you can repair the left side partially, and you still retain that right hemisphere compensation. Yep, really? Exactly. So did rugby help that? I don't know, maybe some of the head knocks didn't, but yeah, just looking at it, because looking at things from outside of the box.
Wow, what a gift, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things I was like, defeated or inspired. I mean, you took something that could defeat you and you actually inspired you and developed it into some incredible skill.
Well, yes, but a lot of it is you've got to step it down. You've got to start. So you've got to start. And so the way that I started was I started with a high, hard goal. And mine back then was to become an internationally renowned best-selling adventure novelist. And so that was way beyond what I could have achieved when I set it, because one, I couldn't spell. Well, I was atrocious at spelling. Back then, I couldn't type. So I had to then, I set that goal and I dialed it back to the basics. What did I need to achieve to be able to achieve this goal? So it was like defining those really clear, small goals and building on them. And then by doing that, it became like a locomotive, because I started doing those things that were really, really difficult for me. And I started using the right side of my brain. But as I started to do that, there were some amazing things that happened, like the struggle of trying to learn how to spell, trying to learn how to type. All of a sudden, when I would type, I would go into the flow.
Really?
And so...
Is that because of the right side?
Yes. Well, basically, when I used a lot of meditation and self-hypnosis. Meditation self-hypnosis helps lower the anxiety. It helps strengthen the prefrontal cortex. And so it allowed me to focus on what I was doing. But unbeknownst to me, with that initial struggle, I became very right-sided. And then I would lapse into the flow, and instead of the prefrontal cortex being active, it diminished, and I was able to dial down and focus and at a very deep level. And then you get those, with flow, you get that cocktail of internal chemicals that help with it, and then you start the neural pathways new neural pathways start developing and start repairing those areas that had once confined me.
So you can rewire the brain.
Correct.
So I did not know that until I went through a very, very dark depression through 2010, and I went to this lady. And she helped me a lot. I went to a therapist, and she hooked me to this stuff, these things that would hook up to your brain. Don't know anything about it. And she said you can rewire your brain. She said you can take chemicals, and I can fix you in 3 weeks. You can work really hard, and you'll get better in a couple of years over time. And I did that, and I'm telling you what, it was the darndest thing that I did. And that was the first time I'd ever heard that you can rewire your brain. And you're sitting there telling me you're doing it while writing. Your brain is actually repairing itself.
Yep.
So when you went through all this, you have dyslexia. You find out when you're mid-20s, basically you really understood it at that point. You think, where you knew something was different, but you don't know, right? Because you weren't diagnosing that 40 years ago. No,
not at all. So it wasn't until my late 20s, early 30s that I knew that I needed that I had some issue that I needed to basically overcome it.
What a testament to your will. A lot of people would have never come out of that.
Well,
seriously, there are people that wouldn't, But wow, that is amazing. You actually accelerated. I mean, that's.
Well, it was just really, Larry, it was just making a decision, setting that high, hard goal and then dialing it down. And I used a lot of subconscious triggers. And so
explain that to me. What is a subconscious trigger?
Okay. So through my consultancy, I knew the power of the subconscious mind because I saw some incredible results that my clients had achieved. And so one of the simplest subconscious triggers is asking yourself a question, setting aside, and don't expecting a conscious answer. And so one of the things that I've done since my 20s is every night I will ask a series of questions, put the question mark, close the journal.
You're writing this down?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And so one thing that I learned is that those questions will be answered. It may not be then. It may not be the next day. But if you continually ask the question, it'll be answered. If you can articulate the question, you already have the knowledge to have it answered. So
Holy cow, that's deep. Okay. So what you're saying then is I got to kind of dumb this down for me. So let's say you have 5 questions you're trying to answer, and you literally write those down, or you speak them every night before you go to bed.
I write them down.
Okay. So you write them down every day.
Yep.
Okay. And then over time, you get the answer, however long that is, and you check that box. You go to the next 4 and you add a 5th one, let's just say, and you continue to do that.
Actually, you're spot on. I generally do 5 questions.
Really?
And then it'll drop off. One of those will drop off when the answer comes.
And how long have you been doing that?
Oh, since my early to late 20s, I suppose.
So you've had a lot of questions answered.
Yes, probably.
Have you ever thought about it? Do you keep a record of that journal?
No.
Wow. You should try to go back and try to figure out what you've answered. That would be, because I'm telling you, that's powerful. Like, I've never heard anybody say that. I think I pray, and I have a time I sit in a sauna. So I spend a lot of time praying, because that's the only time I ever get I try to shut my brain down, because my brain is just like, 100 miles an hour all the time. And I found that by doing that 15 minutes of I've noticed a huge difference in my stress level. Just 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But even if you think about, you go to bed, you've answered, you're writing these questions you want to answer. But what a great feeling to know that based on your track record, you're going to get that answer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do you think the longest question you've ever taken to get answered? I mean, you think it's been days, weeks, months, years?
Yeah, months.
Months.
Yep.
But you figure out you do get an answer.
Yep, for sure. And some of the questions could be about, I'm very detailed, and I try to excel at excellence. And so that's the way that I want to write my books. And if I cannot find the answer to a question, it may be about a scene that I'm writing about, and my research doesn't uncover it when I'm originally start writing, I'll ask that question, and invariably it'll come, and it could come because I'm in the library and I pick up a book and it's in the book, which has happened, or it may come because of overhearing a conversation of somebody in the supermarket or something like that.
No way.
So life will allow you always to achieve your goals. But if you don't ask, you're not going to receive.
You should really write about that. That's some of the craziest stuff. I mean, crazy. I say that in a positive way. I've never thought about that. I'd love to know how many questions you had answered. I mean, you could be literally talking about hundreds, maybe thousands.
Oh, it'll be thousands. Yeah.
To think about that.
Mm-hmm.
And do you do it from the simplest things to obviously, and then as deep as writing your books and doing that type of stuff?
Yeah.
I'm kidding. Wow. So now that you go through all this process, you're obviously helping a ton of people doing this. This is Like just hearing what you just said has actually helped me. I'm getting a therapy session right here with you. So you write these books down and you start writing. Now, can you go for hours writing and you just get in this zone because the brain just opens up and you just unleash, or does it just spurts? How do you write?
Okay, so I'll sit down, and the way that flow works is there has to be a little bit of a struggle first, but there has to be clearly defined goals. And so I'll sit down, and initially there may be struggle of getting the words in the context that I want, but then all of a sudden it's like stepping down into it. And like hours, I look up, and I've been writing for hours.
Okay, well that makes me feel better because I've heard the term writer's block. So I just finished my first book. We're trying to figure out how it's going to work or whatever, and so I can barely put two sentences together on a computer. I can talk very well, but it's hard for me to articulate. My grammar's very poor. I'm a sales guy, right? And I would go days and I couldn't write, and then I'd go out there. I call it the barn every night, and I would write, and all of a sudden it just opens up, and next thing you know, you're writing page after page after page. So that is normal then.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm not saying that everybody does it that way, but that's the way it happens for me.
Well,
and that's obviously happened for you.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and the reason why that happens is because you're operating from the right side of your brain, and you've switched off the conscious awareness, and you are no longer cognitively watching what you're doing. So basically, Larry, you've got out of your own way.
And that's all on this side.
Yeah, it's all right-sided. So you're operating from a more of an intuitive understanding, and if you from that intuitive side of the brain, and it allows you to tap into resources that you didn't know that you had, whether you had perhaps read them years before in a book, seen it in a movie, or whatever. That subconscious part of you hasn't forgotten.
It's there.
Yep.
That hard drive is in the hard drive of your brain forever.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing this, though, some of the other stuff you're talking about, by writing it down, sometimes you've already got the answer. Like you said, that you asked the question. So you're saying if you ask the question, you already know the answer.
Yeah, if you can articulate the question, you already have the knowledge to have it answered.
Really? I've never thought about that. Like that's actually pretty deep, though. Like when you really think about it. I mean, and to think that you do that every day is amazing. I mean, have you ever heard of anybody else doing that? Or is that something you learned through study, or did you pick that up on your own? Because that is...
Actually, I just think I picked that up on my own, and I don't know of anybody else that does that, but I'm sure there are people that do that. But I
bet it's a pretty short list.
Mm.
I bet it's a short list. That'd be interesting. That's why I'm saying you ought to really write about it or blog about it or something, as you're going down this journey of your path that continues to understand that. Because, I mean, that is something that is, to me, that is such a deep thought process. And like you, probably like a lot of people, I'm a very deep thinker. I think about things, I overthink things probably to a point. But so you do this, and you do this every day, and you've done this. So I encourage you to try to go back and maybe write down the list of how many questions you've had answered, because I think that would be absolutely amazing. Because like I said, I've never heard of anybody, do that. So we're bouncing around. So you've done all this. You started writing these books. So when you got that first book, that's when you decided you're going to start writing adventure books.
Well, the reason, yes. I mean, I originally started writing to overcome my dyslexia and learn how to spell, because one of the things that I had to do, Larry, with my consultancy clients was I had to write out personalized therapies to give to my clients under hypnosis. And so it was a twofold reason. One is I wanted to learn how to spell. One, I wanted to get over the constraints of dyslexia, but it was going to help me with my business at that time. But then I took it one step further and started writing, and that's when the real changes started occurring. And I write about Africa because of what I experienced when I was living in Africa, and the time that I spent in the African bush, seeing those wild animals, and it was that experience that I suppose anchored me into realizing, wow, I want to experience this more. I want to give back. And that's one of the reasons why, I have the Quigley Wildlife Foundation, a 501c3, where we donate to, wildlife causes around the world.
And do your books help with that? I mean, that's part of the process, and awareness, obviously.
Yeah. So a portion of my royalties goes to the foundation.
So, wow, that'll take you down a different trail there. Thinking of just like, so you've been in the jungle, the bush, whatever you call that. So you've been with lions.
Yeah.
You've been right up to them. Like,
oh yeah.
I literally, it's the craziest thing in the last, and I don't know why, in the last 2 years, that I have had more dreams about lions. And don't try to tell me why, but those damn things scare the crap out of me. Like, I've seen a couple of videos. That's a big animal. Like, yeah. People don't realize, I've never seen one. I've seen actual life-size statues of them. That is a big animal.
Actually, you know what? One of the, I talk about flow and things like that, but I've just now realized I was in Botswana. I was in the Chobe Game Reserve at a place called Zanine, and we'd come across this lion following this lioness in heat. And so we came around the corner. This lion took a look at us, and I was on the game viewing roof, and there was probably 2 or 3 others there. This lion took one look at the Land Rover and just charged. And these other 2 people that were on the game viewing roof with me, they tumbled back down through the game viewing hatch and actually slammed it shut behind them. Thanks very much.
And you're up there by yourself.
And I'm up there by myself, but I became the calmest I'd ever got. The Land Rover was going back as fast as it could at speed. This lion, it was as if we were standing still, and its chest smashed into the bull bars of the Land Rover and bunted us back even further. But during that time, I was so calm. I had no fear. All I was focused on was getting that photograph. And I got the photograph of a lifetime.
You were taking pictures the whole time? I'm getting goosebumps.
And that was probably, and thinking about that, and I've only just realized that was probably the very first time that I ever experienced being in flow. Dialed down, no fear, no anxiety, just not worrying about the game viewing hatch being locked behind me, just zeroing in on that beast coming.
Yeah, because he's closing the gap.
Oh,
I mean, he's not even.
No.
I saw a video the other day of these people were crazy. They were watching this, and you see it was a lioness coming, and it's like an antelope, we'll call it. Okay, This thing is flying. This thing goes through there. It speeds, and I was shocked at the amount of violence. Like, you think luckily we get access now to video and stuff. It was crazy. So I can't imagine, because those things, what do you think a lion weighs?
Oh, well, if you read one of my books, it'll give you.
I got the one, I'm going to take with me.
It'll give you the weight. But yeah, I mean, you could have, it's, many, many hundreds of pounds. So it's a big.
So these books are based on your life story of going in.
Well, Scars of the Leopard was the first book, and it was solely written to get over dyslexia.
That was your first book.
Yep, okay. And it follows my travels around the world through Africa and what have you. But the other 3 you've got there is there was a fourth one that we're about to present to publishers, and I'm 110,000 words into a seventh one now as well. But they're all. I've taken an endangered animal, and I have written the book around that.
Yeah, I noticed they were different animals.
Yeah. And so I do it a little differently. While they're written about that endangered species, I have characters that I follow in the series. There isn't one main character that goes through all the book.
Okay.
It's sub-characters through the books, and I show the face of another character that specifically focuses on, looking after lions or looking after pangolins or rhinos or elephants or what have you. So,
and do you go over there while you're writing and get some refreshing, or do you pretty much take it now all based on your travels?
Taking it from my travels, but some incredibly in-depth research. While they're books of fiction, they are factually correct. So there are events like throughout the books that are actually factual. People that were, the Indonesian ambassador that was discovered having an ivory carving factory in his ambassador's residence and things like that. So those are real events that were discovered. So they're factual stories based on fact.
Really?
Fictitious stories, based on fact.
And so what year was it when you wrote your first book?
So Scars of the Leopard would have been in my 30s. White Gold would have been, I suppose, a bit later after that. And then I picked it up again in the 2000 sort of 2018.
So it's been a long journey.
Yeah.
This has been a long process.
Yeah, I do have an non-fiction book as well about another aspect that I'm involved in with my life, being a biotoxin, biohazard. So it's.
So do you have a bunch of degrees?
No, I'm just severely dyslexic, which is a degree unto itself.
Yeah, but that's just amazing. Just to think, that you've done all this. Though a challenge, and you've taken something and turned it into such a, life lesson for other people. And what an inspiration to hear that. And think about
Larry, I just, I don't think it's anything special. I just think a little differently.
Well, it is special. You just think differently. Yep. Obviously, this has created this discipline now that you've created through life and stuff like that, and being able to do that. It's a testament. I think about something as simple as my dad not knowing he was colorblind until he went in the military.
Wow.
He just thought all the lights were the same color at the traffic lights, and he goes to be an air traffic controller, and they go, "Oh, did you know you're colorblind?" He's like, "No, I just thought all the trees were orange." He's never seen a green leaf his entire life.
Wow.
And they don't know that. And then you did that, and dyslexia is been around, I guess, obviously forever, and it's just really within the last, what do you think, maybe 10 or 20 years, maybe. I don't even know if it's been 20 years. And it typically, unfortunately, happens because somebody becomes famous, and they go up and go, "Oh, well, I did all this, but by the way, did you know I was dyslexic?" And they're like, what do you mean you're dyslexic? Look how you've done all this stuff, and you overcome this, and then really that's what creates you in so many ways. And to think that you self-diagnosed, basically.
Yep. Yeah. But there are other things that I do as well, Larry, on a daily basis that I've done for decades. Like, I meditate every day.
Same time? You try to block out?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and
that's a discipline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Journaling, those type of things.
I have a buddy of mine that does that. I'm so jealous. Yeah. I can barely write, and to think that you can do that with that. Well, just the fact you write down questions is amazing to me. Mm. And what else do you do for discipline? Do you have any other things? You're obviously very fit. Do you
Well, I'm really lucky. I mean, I can walk past a set of weights, and I seem to grow muscle. So,
Okay.
So I do a lot of stretching. I mean, my morning routine. So I'll get up at 4:30. I will meditate. I'll visualize. I'll journal. I'll do a little bit of stretching. I will then, I will then plunge. And then later
in plunges in cold plunge,
cold water, and then later in the day I will stretch a particular body part, and then probably sauna. So
you do cold plunge morning. So I do workout, sauna, 15 minutes, dry sauna. I just have a little dry sauna under my stairs in my barn, and then I do cold plunge in the evening. I just started doing that about 3 months. That is literally the hardest thing I've ever done. Yeah. I'm down to 50 degrees, 51 degrees, and I get in that thing, and I hate it. I only do it for 3 minutes. How long do you stay in?
Yeah, about 3 minutes. We started. We got a set of 40. So it's.
So I get in mine the first time. It's like 68, and I'm like, this is crazy. Like, there's no way. And I would take a degree every week for the first few weeks, and then I started dialing it down. And I'm at 51 degrees, and I mean, I have to like make myself get in it. Do you ever get? I mean, how long have you been doing that?
Oh, yeah, I've only really probably been doing the plunging side of it for maybe a year.
Okay. So you're like me. You kind of saw it, learned a little bit about it. I read about it. I'm like, and it made sense to me. Like I was like, this logically made sense to me. And I do it before I write, and I get an incredible euphoric feeling because it's that first initial kind of 30 seconds. It's just like, oh, and then you kind of calm down. Everything settles. And then when you get out, I am ready to get out at 3 minutes and 1 second, but you do feel amazing afterwards. It is an amazing, process.
Yeah, it gives you an incredible natural high.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
And for me, I do it. Sometimes I'll do it after I sauna in the evening, but I religiously do it in the morning, and it just sets my day up.
I think I would rather try mine in the morning. My doctor didn't like the fact that I wanted to do sauna cold plunge, and he was really my cardiologist. I've got some heart issues, and he's like, yeah, you probably shouldn't do that. But I have a buddy of mine, he does it. I think he did it the other day. I think he did it 4 times. He went sauna, cold plunge, about 40-ish, sauna, cold plunge. He did that back and forth. Yeah, no, he's crazy.
Yeah, I only do it. I'll do the sauna and then the cold plunge at the end. So
okay, yeah. So you are going right in afterwards, but it probably somewhat feels good because I get my sauna somewhere between 180 and 220 degrees. It's 100% dry. I don't have any infrared or anything like that in there. But I actually really, really enjoy the sauna. Like I feel really good afterwards. Well, unfortunately, our time has come to end. So we're at 49 minutes. We're going to have to do this again because we got a lot more to talk about.
Oh, no, that'd be great. I'd enjoy that.
I really, we'll have to plan on this in a couple of months. I really want to talk about these 5 questions. That is just, I want to start doing some research on that. We'll communicate.
Yep.
And I'm kind of more texting. I don't send big, long emails. I like to talk, man. I'd be really interested in that. That is one of the most unique things I've ever heard. I think a lot of people will be intrigued by that.
Do you want to know how to learn about it?
Yes, I would love to.
Do it.
Okay. That was easy. I was like, I was waiting for the book or the article. You're just like, no, just do it. I'm like, wait. What are you talking about? Yeah. Okay. That's a deal. So I love to close with this one. I've listened to your great journey, and only a small, fraction of it is just, do you feel like you were born, or do you feel like you were made?
That's a great question, Larry. So I believe I'm a combination because dyslexia, people are genetically disposed with it. Those genes may not express themselves. They did with me. So I was born with my greatest gift. But what I've had to do to get to where I am today, I was certainly made. So both for me, Larry. That's an excellent question.
Yeah, and I've heard lots of different answers. And the great thing about it is there's no wrong answer.
Yeah.
That is the great thing about it is there's truly no wrong answer.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, good. I'm getting one of your books. Actually, Brigitta's got me one, and I'm going to read it on the plane. I like it. They weren't real big books. I love reading them. I've never read an adventure of anything about Africa or lions or anything like that.
Well, actually, this one is about a real operation that was undertaken in the Zambezi Valley in the 1980s, Operation Stronghold. And so a couple of the characters within it actually were involved in that
what
operation.
Animal is this one?
This is for the black rhino. So they relocated hundreds of black rhinos from the Zambezi Valley to secure sanctuaries throughout Zimbabwe to get them away from those poachers that poached along the Zambezi River near the Zambian border.
What is the affection, or I say affection, that's the wrong adjective, but why do people want the rhino horn? I mean, what is it?
It's Asian. All it is because of Asian traditional medicine. And so for centuries, they have prescribed powdered rhino horn for certain ailments, and that's what it is. So there is no scientific evidence that the rhino horn does what they prescribe. But because it's written...
and it's cultural at that point, right?
Exactly. So really, for us to change that, it has to be a lot about education, re-educating the future generations to realize that, no, you don't.
Does your website talk about that? Your foundation and stuff like that?
So, I mean, I do a number of talks and what have you on social media about, rhino horn poaching and trafficking and lion parts and ivory and pangolin poaching, that type of stuff. So.
And what's the name of your website again?
DavidMarkQuigley.com.
Okay, that's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got that one. I saw that one. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, this has been fun. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you. It's great.
Thank you very much, Larry.
Yeah.